What if I told you that everything you believe about morality, truth, and the meaning of life might be a comfortable lie? That the very foundations of Western civilization rest on a fear of life itself? This is the radical claim of Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century German philosopher who took a hammer to our most cherished beliefs. He declared God dead, morality an invention, and suffering essential to greatness. And yet, more than a century after his death, his ideas feel more relevant than ever. Today, we're diving into the philosophy of one of history's most misunderstood and provocative thinkers. We'll explore his concept of the Übermensch, the eternal recurrence, the will to power, and his devastating critique of traditional morality. By the end, you might not agree with Nietzsche, but you'll never think about life the same way again. Let's begin. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. These are perhaps Nietzsche's most famous words, but they're also his most misunderstood. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating atheism or simply denying God's existence. He was diagnosing a crisis in Western civilization. For thousands of years, God provided the ultimate foundation for meaning, morality, and truth. But by the late 19th century, Nietzsche saw that educated Europeans no longer truly believed. Science, rationalism, and the Enlightenment had done their work. The problem? We had killed God, but kept his moral system. This is what Nietzsche called the great danger, living in a godless world while clinging to Christian values like humility, pity, and equality. These values, he argued, only made sense within a Christian worldview. Without God, they become nihilism, the belief that nothing has meaning or value. Imagine removing the foundation of a house, but expecting the walls to remain standing. That's what Nietzsche saw happening in modern Europe. And he predicted that the 20th century would be the bloodiest in history as this tension exploded. Looking at the world wars, totalitarian regimes, and genocides that followed, his prophecy seems chillingly accurate. But Nietzsche didn't stop at diagnosis. He wanted to offer a cure. And that cure required going beyond good and evil. Nietzsche asked a question no one had seriously considered. Where does morality come from? The traditional answer was that moral values are eternal, universal truths, perhaps given by God or discovered through reason. But Nietzsche saw morality as a human invention, created by specific groups of people for specific purposes. He identified two fundamental types of morality: master morality and slave morality. Master morality is the morality of the strong, the noble, the powerful. In this system, good means strong, beautiful, proud, and life-affirming. Bad simply means weak, ugly, or common, not evil, just inferior. Think of ancient Greek heroes or Viking warriors. They celebrated strength, courage, and excellence. They didn't feel guilty about their power. But then something happened, what Nietzsche called the slave revolt in morality. The weak, unable to overcome the strong through force, achieved a brilliant psychological victory. They inverted the value system. Suddenly, the qualities of the weak, humility, meekness, self-denial, pity, became good, and the qualities of the strong, pride, power, self-assertion, became evil. Christianity, Nietzsche argued, was the ultimate expression of slave morality. It taught that the meek shall inherit the earth, that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven, that we should turn the other cheek. Nietzsche saw this as a kind of spiritual poison, a system that made people ashamed of their strength, their desires, their very life force. It created what he called the sick animal. humans turned against themselves, feeling guilty for existing. Now, this doesn't mean Nietzsche wanted cruelty or oppression. He despised nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the kind of brutal power politics that the Nazis later falsely associated with his work. What he wanted was for humans to stop being ashamed of life itself. So if traditional morality is an invention, what should replace it? Nietzsche's answer: the will to power. This is probably his most misunderstood concept. The will to power isn't about dominating others or political control. It's the fundamental drive in all living things to grow, expand, create, and overcome resistance. A plant growing toward the sun demonstrates will to power. An artist perfecting their craft demonstrates will to power. A person overcoming their limitations demonstrates will to power. It's the basic urge to become more than you currently are. Nietzsche saw this force as more fundamental than even the will to survive. Animals risk their lives for status and territory. Artists sacrifice comfort for creation. Why? Because there's something in life that wants to express itself, to expand, to overcome. The question isn't whether you have a will to power. You do, simply by being alive. The question is, how will you express it? You can express it creatively or destructively. You can direct it toward genuine self-overcoming, or toward resenting those who have what you lack. You can use it to create values, or to tear down the values of others. This brings us to Nietzsche's vision of the higher human, the Übermensch. The Übermensch, often translated as Superman or Overman, is Nietzsche's answer to the question, what comes after God? If God is dead and traditional morality is collapsing, the Übermensch is the human who creates their own values, who says yes to life despite its suffering, who transforms themselves into something higher. The Übermensch doesn't follow the herd. They don't adopt ready-made values from society, religion, or tradition. They have the courage to stand alone and ask, what do I truly value? What kind of person do I want to become? This requires tremendous strength, not physical strength, but spiritual strength. The strength to endure uncertainty, the strength to take responsibility for your own existence, the strength to create meaning in a meaningless universe. Nietzsche uses the metaphor of 3 transformations. First, you're a camel, carrying the heavy burdens of traditional values. Then you become a lion, rebelling against those values, learning to say no. But the lion cannot create. It can only destroy. Finally, you must become a child, innocent, creative, making a new beginning, affirming life. The Übermensch affirms even the suffering of existence. This brings us to perhaps Nietzsche's strangest idea, the eternal recurrence. Imagine a demon appeared to you and said, "This life, exactly as you've lived it, you will have to live again and again and again, for all eternity. Every pain and every joy, every thought and every sigh, everything unutterably small and great in your life will return to you, all in the same sequence." How would you react? Would you curse this demon? Or would you fall to your knees in gratitude? This is Nietzsche's thought experiment of eternal recurrence. He asks, could you love your life so much that you would want to live it infinitely? Most people would be horrified. They live with regret, resentment, waiting for some future happiness. But the Übermensch would embrace eternal recurrence. They would live in such a way that they could say yes to every moment, even the painful ones, because those moments made them who they are. This is Nietzsche's ultimate test of life affirmation. So where does this leave us? Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort. He doesn't give us easy answers or moral certainties. Instead, he offers a challenge to become who we truly are, to create our own values, to say yes to life in all its terrible beauty. Whether you agree with Nietzsche or not, his central question remains: are you living a life you would choose to live forever? That's the question he leaves us with. And perhaps that's the most valuable thing any philosopher can do, not to give us answers, but to ask us questions we cannot ignore. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Nietzsche's philosophy. Now go forth and become who you are.